President Devalle. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, Dr. Jackson and Chief McDade. Thank you for your kind words. I do want to, before I go to the accelerated placement, just really want to thank CPS for the past 18 years. I started my career as a teacher, moved up to assistant principal, network chief, and chief officer of teaching and learning. I've been enriched with all the interactions, all the people that I've encountered, especially the students who I still up to this day, I go to their christening, their children's christening, and it's wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience, so thank you. Today I'm presenting the Accelerated Placement Act and seeking the board to vote on this new policy. In August of 2017, the ex-governor had actually signed HB 100-0421, which is called the Accelerated Placement Act, and this requires every district in Illinois to put together a policy that will provide students, that's not only for gifted and accelerated students, the opportunity to be exposed to an academically appropriate setting and instructional setting. There are 3 areas that this policy will be applicable. The first is its early entry. The second area will be whole grade acceleration, and the third is single subject acceleration, and I will dig deeper into each one of these categories. There are 4 components when putting together this policy. Our district has actually taken this entire year to put together a thoughtful policy. We did, when I say we, that means it's individuals and team members from early childhood, from access and enrollment, policy, law department, network chiefs, principals, cabinet members, to make sure, and even FACE, to make sure that we are putting together a very thoughtful policy. We engage our parents and community to get their feedback, and we have incorporated all those different items into our policy. So the first component to make sure when putting together or designing this policy is that it will not only be limited to students who have already been identified as gifted or talented. The second is that it has to be a fair and equitable process that involves multiple persons, multiple individuals, including parents and guardians. The third is there has to be a process by which we notify parents in writing throughout the process. This is very similar to the selective enrollment process, where every time there's a different process or step, the parents are notified in writing where their child stands. And the last one is the assessment process that includes multiple valid, reliable indicators. And this has been, I think, out of the 4, most challenging. We've done extensive research, contacted other districts across Illinois to make sure that we are aware of the different ways that this policy is being enacted across the district. I'm going to start with digging deep into the early entrance to kindergarten. Currently, our policy, we have no accelerated policy for early entrance, but what we have is we're going to keep, a student has to be 5 years old by September 1st in order to enroll in kindergarten. That policy is staying, but what we are adding on to this policy is, first of all, we would like, we're proposing that to be eligible for early entrance to kindergarten, the child's 5th birthday must fall between September 2nd and December 31st. So that is our policy proposal. But we also would like to make sure that readiness, kindergarten readiness, is something that we take seriously, because this is not only about academics, we also care deeply about a student's social emotional development. Because of that, we would like our students to at least have completed 1 year of preschool before entering kindergarten at an earlier stage compared to their peers. So these are the placement criteria. The first is for age, which is a pre-qualifier. Again, September 2nd to December 31st. The child must be 5 years old and completed a 1 year of preschool. For the developmental survey, when the parent fills out an application, we also would like that parent to complete a developmental survey of their child. This developmental survey is a normed instrument that our CPS psychologists have actually recommended and is being used widely in our district. When a student meets our threshold for developmentally ready for kindergarten, they are now able to sit and take the exam, and our CPS psychologist during the summer will administer a cognitive test and an academic abilities test. So the timeline for this is actually the first phase of our implementation of the Accelerated Placement Act, which is right after the board votes on this and approves. We will begin starting Monday to actually have locations across the city that will allow parents to apply to this. So it will be a paper pencil application form, and while they are applying, they will also complete the developmental survey. The psychologist will be scoring the survey, and parents will immediately be receiving a letter in the mail or an email, depending on how they want to receive communication, letting them know that their child qualified to be able to sit for the exam. So what we are hoping is by the mid-August, we will have a list of all these students, and we are able to inform the principal. One thing about this, one thing that we have added to this placement policy is every school that is receiving students will have, the principal will put together an accelerated placement team. We want to ensure that there is an adult team that it will include the counselor, the social worker, the teacher. The principal can delegate these individuals, because we want to make sure that the students are tracked throughout the year and their success is guaranteed. The parent will be a really important part of putting together the action plan for every child throughout the year. This chart just shows you the reason why I left the September 2nd to October 31st column is because originally this policy, when we presented it to parents, it was a recommendation, which is we will accept 4-year-olds if their birthday if they turn 5 from September 2nd to October 31st. But because the recommendations that we received from different stakeholders asked us to move to extend it to December 31st, and that's exactly what we did. So this will actually show you the breakdown per network. So at the end, we are looking at around perhaps 2,000 students who will be eligible. These are CPS students who are in our preschool. If there are students outside of CPS preschool, we're not obviously able to include that data point. But we're looking around 2,000, perhaps 2,500 students who might be eligible to apply. This is a parent choice. We're not saying this will be the number. We're just saying that at least we have an idea of how many psychologists will be needed. I've worked closely with the Office of Diverse Learners, and they are prepared to handle the number of psychologists and the number of students that will be potentially applying for this policy. Next, I'd like to move to the whole grade acceleration. We currently do not have whole grade acceleration, also known as grade skipping. So what we are proposing is that students in grades 3 to 6 will be considered for whole grade acceleration. This is also called the grade skipping. We are working with IIT, who also does all the testing for our selective enrollment. That's why there's a time frame issue here. For this particular policy, compared to the early entry is immediately implementable starting Monday. For this policy, we are waiting until January 2020 to March 2020 for the application period. And the reason behind that is because of the volume of students that will be tested. IIT would like to first complete the first round of testing for all the selective enrollment and then move towards this group of students. As you notice that we are enforcing a fee for these policies, but it is not a hurdle or a barrier to any of our families who needs assistance. On the application form, it will actually say a checkbox. Number 1, it will say, I am able to meet the fee. The second one is, I'm not able to meet the entire amount, but be gladly to contribute whatever. And the third is, I would like to apply for a full waiver. So none of the fees should, prevent any of our families to access this policy. So here's sort of a grid of what it looks like. We have a pre-qualifier. Remember, this is a 3rd grader who's going to be 5th grade the following school year. So the stakes here are pretty high for a student. So our Our overall pre-qualifier, we would like the student to be able to meet and exceeds on the IAR, formerly known as the PART testing. And then on the MAP data, which is our NWEA, for 2 consecutive test administration, we would like students to score between the 95th to 99th percentile, and a report card, a GPA of 3.75 to 4.0. Once a student meets all these criteria, and we did our research, which is we've identified around close to 100 students throughout the district who actually will qualify and meet this criteria. Then they move into the school factors. So part of this is we are using the Iowa Acceleration Scale, which is a nationally normed test. This gives the teachers and the school team the ability to go through a developmental checklist for the student. There are scores that are attached to these, and then once the student meets the pre-qualifier, the school factors, then they are recommended for testing. And they're taking 3, multiple batteries of tests. This page just gives you sort of a breakdown of the scores that we are following based on the Iowa Acceleration Scale. Also, majority of the district uses the same scale. So a student who scores overall between 60 to 80 points is a good candidate or an excellent candidate for whole grade acceleration. And the reason why we say excellent candidate, because there will be one factor why a child would not be accelerated, is because the child doesn't want to. And we feel like when the parents meet with a team at the school to develop the plan for the student moving forward, we want to make sure that student understands you're leaving your classmates. These are friends you grew up from kindergarten. You are going to be with the older children next year. Not to scare the child, but what to make sure that the child really understands, her or his new learning environment and his new peers for the following school year. The third category is the single subject acceleration. Again, we have no existing policy in CPS. Although in many of our schools, we have students in a regular classroom who are actually, taking accelerated curriculum within their grade level peers. But because that is varied from school to school, we're not really able to call that a policy. So the policy here in writing is students in grades 3 through 7 will have the ability to be accelerated in a single subject. We did not decide a single subject, it's what ISB had proposed. So this is either reading or math. Again, there's a pre-qualifier for this. Overall exceed score for that particular subject, either reading or math, in 95th to 99th percentile, and a GPA of 4 in that subject. From here, we go to the school additional factors, which is the same. The school team uses the checklist from Iowa Acceleration Scale for school and academic factors and interpersonal skills. And there's a possible total points here of 31. We're saying students score greater or equal to 26. And this child will take an achievement test at the next grade level. So a 3rd grader, when they qualify for this, they'll be taking a 4th grade exam in math or reading. And this is the timeline for both single subject and whole grade acceleration. We start the application process from January till March, and starting April, May will be all the testing at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And principals and parents will receive communication throughout this process. And I do want to thank all the CPS stakeholders. This has been a year of putting together this policy. Every time we come in front of a different stakeholder groups, we continue to receive feedback. And I just want to make sure that behind all this is true advocacy for children, to make sure that our children have the opportunities, not just academic opportunities, but also social emotional opportunities to continue to grow and develop into wonderful human beings. Thank you.